Welcome to the Overcom University Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is Bracha Goetz. She is an author of over 40 books, and she's here to tell us about her story, how she overcame adversity and got into writing. Bracha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Bracha, you're one that has written so many books, and there has to be a story behind something that has inspired you to author so many books. Because I've only written one book in my life so far, and I accomplished that, but it took me a while, and it really took like my heart and soul, vulnerability, transparency to even put pen to paper and just like really pour out my life story into a book. Can you tell us what inspired you to start your books?
Well, I'll tell you, your book probably has more words than all 40 of my books, you know? They're they're very short books, most of them for children. I love putting a really deep, important message in very few words. That's it's my joy, and it's also a challenge. That's what I love to do. I try to write the books that I wished I had as a child.
Mm,
I write the books that help children's souls to shine from from as early in life as possible. I teach children happiness skills because the earlier you get them in life, then you have them your whole life, and you don't have to play catch up like us as adults. Yeah.
why do you think it's so important to get kids at a young age and start teaching them this?
It it imprints directly on their soul. And if you learn, for instance, gratitude skills as a young child, you look at the whole world differently. From the very beginning of life, you train yourself to become a grateful person. This is something I didn't learn until much later.
Mm.
There's so much more joy a person can experience if they learn the secret to happiness early in life.
Wow. If you can, tell us a little bit about one of your most recent books and why you wrote that book and what could readers actually get from that book.
Okay, the title of my most recent book, which really, like you were saying, this book took me 30 years to write. I'll tell you why. It's called Don't Read This Book, right? But but I had the title like 30 years ago. I wrote most of the book 30 years ago, but
Hmm.
it wasn't right. Something was missing. I said, this is not right. This book has a scary ending. I need a really wonderful, joyful ending that children can absorb it. I didn't get that until about 2 years ago. Really, inspiration from me comes from the source of all energy. So when it finally came, when I finally got the wisdom, this is the surprise ending to the book. This book, don't read this book. It's written in the voice of that inner critic that we all have, and children get it as a child, whether it's from whatever abuse, neglect, trauma of any kind, whatever pain a person goes through, they develop inner critics. And what that voice is telling us all the time, it's trying to get us to be miserable. It gets us to focus on what we're missing. The minute we realize that, we gain power over that voice. The minute we realize, oh my gosh, you're trying to make me miserable by focusing on what I'm lacking. Instead, I'm going to be grateful for what I already have. That changes everything. And that's the skill that children can learn early on in life, which is amazing. We all have that voice in our heads, and we all can overcome it. And the surprise ending that I didn't get until recently in life is that voice, it really doesn't want you to listen to it. It's like this. It's like, I can barely lift it. It's like a dumbbell. It When you lift the weight, that's how you grow your muscles. So when you push off that voice, That's how you grow your gratitude muscles. And each person has their own personal trainer, because the voice knows each person's weakness, what will get them miserable. The minute you recognize that that's what's talking and making you miserable, you could push it off, and that's how you grow your gratitude muscles. The more you do it, the more neural pathways you create. It's like a muscle, your brain. You create more neural pathways and you become a more and more grateful person the more you practice gratitude.
I love that. I think of how I practice gratitude every single morning and just being super thankful for the things that I'm blessed to have. And I think about in the society that we grow up in, oftentimes we're influenced or distracted by so much negativity or the people that surround us or the information that we're feeding ourselves. And it has so much of an implication as we go out throughout our days. And you bringing something like this to intercede with that in regards to changing our thought process, changing how I think, and I think this is a beautiful concept.
Yeah, it and you know what most people don't realize, when these books for children, they're the only books that every age reads, because the little child's reading it, there's an adult reading it to the child. It could be a parent, could be a teacher, and then it could be a grandparent. And then, like when teenagers, they find these books laying around, they read them when no one's looking. So every single age can get the message from a picture book. It's like the best way to get messages out into the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Braca, I'm one to think that, when someone decides to dive into writing or wants to attack an issue or face an issue, it's started from like something deep within you, right? So for myself, I think, why did I want to write my book and get my message out there? Well, I was suffering through depression, anxiety, PTSD. I struggled with divorce and some of those things that was tied to that, and I was in a very, very dark place. And once I started journaling and writing, I started seeing that my vulnerability and transparency was actually something healing for me. And I started creating connections with other people that was going through some of the same things when I was sharing my story. When for most of my life, I bottled up those emotions, bottled up those feelings because I didn't want to allow anybody into my space. Can you talk a little bit if this happened to you or for the people, for the kids that are getting your books? Did something occur in your life where you said, you know what, this has occurred to me and this is how I was dealing with, these are some things that I was facing, and this is the best way for me to give back, this is the best way for me to put this inside of a book and share my message where I could start helping people?
Exactly. The children's books are all about what I've learned through my struggles, told in a really simple and joyful way.
Hmm.
But I wrote one book for adults. It's called Nourish the Soul. And it says, and the subtitle is Filling the Emptiness Within. I was suffering with food addictions for years. And like any addiction, but the analogy with the food addiction is really obvious. A person is desperately trying to put in externalities to fill the emptiness within. That's how addictions work. You're trying to get fleeting pleasure to cover up the emptiness, cover up the pain with comfort, and it lasts very fleetingly while you're eating the bag of potato chips, while you're devouring the whole box of chocolate chip cookies, while you're finishing the whole big container of ice cream. You're perfectly happy, and then it's over. And you are emptier than you were before. You're emptier than the container of ice cream. You it doesn't cover. It doesn't last. The pleasure doesn't last. So what was I really longing for? Lasting pleasure in life. And none of these things last long enough. The box of cookies doesn't last long enough. So what does last? when I finally found the wisdom that I was searching for, what lasts is gratitude. That is what fills us up. So I learned about something called the pleasure ladder, which has changed my life because it's that sense of scarcity in life.
Mhm.
That's what breeds addictions, anxiety, depression. I'm not getting enough. I'm lacking. I'm missing that focus. What fills us up is the sense of abundance. Um, and and that gratitude fills us up. So when we are in addiction, we feel disconnected, estrangement, loneliness, all of these things. What fills us is connection. And that comes through gratitude. So if you want, I'll share the pleasure ladder. It has 5 rungs on it, which I think it corresponds to our 5 fingers because it's showing that it's empowerment. We can bring pleasure into our lives. We have that power to do it. We can do it. So the 5 rungs on the pleasure ladder, they correspond to the 5 levels of the human soul. This is ancient mystical wisdom. This is not coming from my head. This is what I finally learned that filled my soul, that nourished my hungry soul. So, and when you have a hungry soul, there's never enough ice cream or potato chips that can fill it. Yeah. Yeah. So once you really recognize that, then you realize there's an abundance of ways to fill it. And it's not that. So on the lowest level of pleasure are all the natural physical pleasures. They were put in this world for us to experience them with grateful joy. When we experience music or being in nature or eating natural foods, and when we experience them with gratitude, it nourishes both our body and our soul. The lowest level of the soul is the part that's connected to the body. So these will be all sensual pleasures that were put here for that purpose, like an orange. An orange, it's green. All the fruit are green until they're ripe, and then they call us, we're ready. They become bright and beautiful, and they're beautiful to look at. They smell good, and they are individually wrapped. And then when we open the peel, it's got this sweet juiciness that's kept in for months just because of the peel. And then when we finish it, we're left with the seeds. And the seeds they can become an infinite amount of trees, an infinite amount of oranges. They're filled with infinite wisdom
Right.
and loving kindness in just one orange. So when we're in addiction, we feel like nobody cares about us. And here's an orange filled with loving kindness, filled with wisdom. It changes our whole life, this new perspective. So it gives us basic connection to another natural thing in the world when we're feeling isolated. And the next level up is love. And you could say love, well, that doesn't feel empowering. It's dependent on somebody else. But this ancient mystical definition is focusing on the virtues of another. We could do that anytime. Nobody has to be there. Like we could be in solitary confinement in prison, and a person could think about a grandmother that once did a kindness for them, and they get a warm emotional feeling of love, and they're inspired to be a better person. So we can bring love into our lives at any moment by focusing on the virtues of another.
Mhm.
Should I go? You want to hear the other 3 levels, or should I?
Sure, go ahead. We already started. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so the next level up is meaning, doing something good and meaningful in the world. Each one brings us more connection and more pleasure, more lasting pleasure. When we do something meaningful, I was on another show, and the host, he said he was he was feeling lonely and miserable. He finished 2 slices of pizza by himself, and he was about to plow through the whole box of pizza by himself. There's a knock on his door, and his neighbor needs his help for 2 minutes. He helps his neighbor. He comes back. He doesn't want the pizza anymore. He puts the rest in the fridge for another day. What changed? He he just did something meaningful for someone else.
Right, right.
He made that connection. It's amazing. It works instantaneously. And the funny thing is, this is surprising. What's higher than doing something meaningful is being creative. When we're in the creative zone, we don't feel like eating or sleeping. And time, we don't even know time is passing when we're in the
You're
midst of
exactly right.
creating. Yes,
You're exactly right.
it's such a high. It's such
You're
a
on a
high
high.
pleasure. Exactly. And the highest pleasure of all is called transcendence. That is, it's oneness. It's seeing how we're all connected. It's seeing like all the vegetation is giving to us, it's giving us the oxygen. We're giving it the carbon dioxide. We're all connected. We look like we're separate. We're just packaged separately, but we're really one big soul. It's amazing. We really have so much in common all around the world. It's incredible. And it's also when we lift the veils of separation, and when we lift the veils of our own um I forgot the word, but when our own limitations, that's it. When we lift our own when we make that first crack in a bad habit, we do something new that we haven't done before. It's this amazing feeling of connecting, and connecting to our infinite soul, really, not feeling that limitation any longer. That's the feeling of transcendence, which we even feel under a starry, starry sky. We know we're a part of a greater universe. That stays with us forever. So these are the levels of pleasure. And when I I have like a more about what I said on my website. Like, people can download this chart, they could put it on their fridge or their cabinet. When you feel like overeating, it's because you feel a sense of scarcity. You need more pleasure. This is how to remember that there's lasting pleasure available to everybody, and we have the power to bring it into our lives at any minute. I
Wow.
forgot. Oh,
Go,
one
go
thing
ahead. Go ahead.
I
Go ahead.
just
Go ahead. Go
forgot
ahead.
to
Go
say.
ahead. Go ahead.
The one thing you need to do to climb any rung on the pleasure ladder, there's just one price to pay, and that price is gratitude. That is the secret to climbing the pleasure ladder.
I was just gonna say, so I was working with someone, and I told him I had an addiction around eating, and I had to work on that, and I had to fix that, and it was getting out of that mindset of what eating was tied to. If you can you share with our audience from your experience, what are some practical steps, or what are some things that can help people get past some of the barriers in regards to getting to the next level of getting past addiction, or getting past things that are like limitations or limiting beliefs and things that are holding them back in life?
Beautiful. Like, for instance, when I feel like overeating, the question that comes into my mind now is it your body that's hungry or your soul?
Hmm.
Because I recognize the difference. If if I'm overeating, I had a good meal and I just want to keep going, it's because my soul is hungry. It's not my body. My body's okay. It's that I need some of these other pleasures. You know what? Sub in an orange. Sub in leaving a message for someone, telling them what, even just a text message. What do you appreciate about someone? When you leave that message, you'll see the bag of potato chips stops calling your name right that minute. It's incredible. You just fill yourself up with gratitude. Open the window, feel the sunshine, go out, start walking, turn on the music, start stretching or dancing. It right away you get back the power, and the food stops having that power over you. It's an incredible thing that happens, and you can see the transformation immediately. Just give it a try.
In your opinion, what role does mindfulness play in regards to like being super intentional about what you're doing and being in the present and being in the moment?
Yes, mindfulness, I call it mindful gratitude, because that's what I want to fill my mind. Um, like for instance, another thing I say to myself is, let's say if I feel like just eating this whole thing of ice cream, I say, if I eat 95 more spoonfuls of this ice cream, will I then feel full? I won't. I know that. It's not going to make any difference. I'll still be left with the emptiness. I keep reminding myself this. This is calling this into my mind, filling my mind with these helpful mantras, sayings that remind me, so that it's really my soul that's hungry. And and I'm not dependent on anybody else to bring pleasure into my life. We can actually do it. And it's through gratitude. It's appreciating what we already have. That's what's so amazing. We think that's going to give me happiness. But right now, I mean, anyone listening to the podcast has ears to hear, eyes, hopefully they can see. They have arms. We're moving. It's incredible. There's so many diseases that they don't have. We have so much to be grateful for.
You know what's interesting? I tie what you're saying to what you initially said in the beginning, that getting to kids at a young age and addressing some of these issues is so important, because if they're not addressed immediately, that's why they linger with depression, anxiety, overeating, all of these different things that stem to some things that affect us from a childhood age. So I think it's brilliant that you actually identified something where you could catch it and be a part of the solution in regards to addressing some of these issues that we do know affect kids, but affects us in the long term as well too.
Yes, we all have infinitely resilient souls. This is what our souls look like. It's this light. It's always shining. But we go through stuff. We go through trauma, we go through neglect, whatever, and we can't even feel or see that we're still shining. Sometimes we need support. We need a coach, a therapist, someone to help us remove those layers so we could see that we're still shining. And we also need to be nourishing our soul from within. And that's what we do with experiencing gratitude. Any moment that we're experiencing gratitude is a moment that we're not being miserable. So we just keep adding on those moments, and that's how we get more grateful lives.
Absolutely. So, Bracha, whenever you're faced with a tough situation or an obstacle, how is it that you go about it in regards to getting past something that may be a stumbling block for you? Or in the past, if it was, how did you get through some things that was challenging for you?
Yeah, I still have challenges. Those questions still come to me. Are you, because it's a habit. And when
Hmm.
you have had a habit for years, you tend to fall back, and everybody has relapses. I I love to say expect the relapse. And like, yeah, and like say like, oh, I just ate 5 candy bars, I might as well have 5 more. No, and then because you get miserable after you have a relapse, you go, "No, I ate 5 candy bars. I'm so grateful I didn't eat 10. If I ate 10, I'm grateful I didn't have 50." You can always be grateful for something. That's yeah, and you get used to that. The more you do it, it gets easier and easier to be grateful. It's like it's like when if no one's traveled down a road, it's really hard, it's very gravelly. But once you've been down that road, it gets easier and easier. Those are the neural pathways we create in our brain. The more we practice gratitude, the easier it becomes and the more joyful our lives become.
I think the important part of what you just said is always looking at the positive side. As you were saying that, I could think of the times where I would eat something and eat it until like I got sick,
Yep,
and then I started the whole process over again. Whether it
yep,
was, so to speak, I want to eat healthy again, or I want to start something over. But I was always in that funk of
yes,
I just damaged so many things within my body,
yeah.
opposed to the alternative of thinking much more positive. All right, let's get past that and keep on moving.
Yeah, and I loved when you were laughing. I love your laughter because that's what it's all about, to be able to laugh at ourselves. Oh my gosh, I didn't have 250 candy bars. It's like always, those people. There's the show, the Netflix, My 600-Pound Life. These
Oh my
people,
gosh, I see
they,
that show.
yeah, they're stuck in bed and
Uh-huh.
they can't move. They can't, and all the only pleasure they're getting, all say, this is the only thing bringing me pleasure. My gosh. So just give them some envelopes to stuff. Tell them to start texting people with nice messages. Start giving them other pleasures, and they'll realize they could still, even if they're stuck in bed, they could still bring other pleasures into their lives, and make what they're stuck on, just the food, smaller and smaller. It doesn't have to overpower their whole life.
Absolutely. So how is it that you go through your daily life and daily process and handle like self-care and self-love along just having a joyful lifestyle that you want to have for yourself?
Yeah, it's become really that way, and it sure wasn't. In my memoir, I talk about when I didn't want to live any longer.
Mm.
I didn't understand the purpose of life. I did not want to go on. I went to a very, very low place. Um, and now my life is filled with, you know, healthy eating, exercising, dancing, a lot of loving people, appreciating people, doing meaningful things, doing creative stuff, and transcending through podcasts. I love podcasts because you could connecting with people like in all different countries. Like I'm in Israel now, and you're in the States, and it's just so awesome to connect through our souls. Through this medium. It's awesome. So I just fill up my day with all kinds of things to be grateful for. And of course, challenges happen for sure. And I try to, like, do what you do. Try to laugh about them. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're in this physical world. We're spiritual beings in a physical world to bring out all those spiritual sparks. We get challenges throughout life. That's part of life. But our job is to keep turning to gratitude. That's really our purpose for being here.
I agree. I think it's important that we have this one life to live, and it's important for us to embrace all of the challenges and hurdles, as it's teaching us so much about ourselves. But what it does is also makes you an example to empower people, inspire people through some of the challenges that you've been through. So to hear your story in regards to like, yeah, you were like in a challenging place at one particular point, and you decided making a decision that this is not going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to change my life and start making an impact and living through gratitude. I think is phenomenal.
I'm so grateful. I'm telling you, when I wanted to get out of the addiction, I knew it was terrible. The walls get so narrow. It takes up your whole life. I wanted to get out intellectually. I knew I was destroying myself, but
Hmm.
that didn't matter. I didn't have the tools, the wisdom to get out. I didn't have the key. And the key is in your mind. It really, the walls are made up of your own thoughts in this prison that we create for ourselves. And we have the key, but we don't know it. We're not aware. I really feel like I didn't have it until I had the wisdom, the tools to get out of the prison. So I'm so grateful. And that's why I spend now my time sharing it with other people, because we need so much more joy in this world.
Absolutely. So, as we get ready to wrap up, what are some things that you're working on this year? What are some things that you plan to release this year? You already written 42 books, so are you writing some more books? Is there some more things that you plan on doing, or some more podcasts you plan on being on for this year?
Yeah, more books are coming out soon. I actually now wrote a children's book about the pleasure ladder. That is really exciting to teach it to really young children. I have a book that was a classic years ago called The Happiness Box, which is coming out again, teaching children where their happiness box is. Here's a hint.
Mhm.
And all kinds of things that all these are coming up. So I'm really excited about it, and I love doing this. It's great.
So, what message or hopes of encouragement would you like to leave with our audience from your story? We have an audience from a diverse background that listens to this podcast, and I love your story. I love your journey, and I love the fact that you're giving back. So, what can our listeners take away from your story?
I I want to say, once you feel fulfilled in other areas of your life, you will no longer feel the need to fill the void with food. So, how do you do that? Identify what brings you more pleasure than eating, or or sub in a different word for eating, whatever your addiction is. To overcome a habit, you need a greater and more lasting pleasure to sub in. And the the habit is the gratitude habit. That works across all addictions. And the more you sub it into your life, the easier it becomes to overcome whatever prison you're now in.
Wow, thank you for that. Well, Bracha, thank you so much for being a guest. How can our listeners, or for anyone that's out there is looking for your message and your story and your books, how can they find you?
Yeah, if I think if you put your email address into my website, you can download the free chart of the pleasure ladder, which is so valuable to put in your own homes to remind yourself that there's really infinite love and wisdom available to bring into your life all the time. You could find that on my website.
Absolutely. Well, Bracha, thank you so much for being a guest on Overcom University Podcast. It's been a pleasure
Thank
having you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Guys, well, if you like this episode, make sure you leave a comment, but also share with a family and a friend, as we know that these stories can be an inspiration. Until next time, God bless.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.